It began on a quiet afternoon when the world thought their story had already ended. Months had passed since Xing Fei and Yu Menglong last appeared together in public, and fans had almost accepted that whatever spark once existed between them was now nothing more than a fading memory. Yet no one could have predicted what was about to unfold that day when Xing Fei finally broke her silence. The message came unexpectedly. A simple handwritten note, captured under the soft light of her living room window, with her voice trembling through a recording that would later be shared across every major platform. There was something raw and haunting in her tone as she spoke, her words carrying the kind of weight that only comes from a heart that has loved deeply and lost quietly. "I don't know if you'll ever hear this," she began softly, her eyes red from nights of unspoken pain. "But I need to say it, even if it's just for my own peace. You were not just someone I worked with. You were the calm in my chaos, the silence that healed my noise." Every sentence that followed felt like a slow unraveling of emotions she had kept buried for years. She spoke about how they first met on set, how awkward it was when their eyes met for the first time, and how neither of them expected that what started as a simple partnership would turn into something so deeply personal. She remembered the laughter between takes, the long rehearsals under the studio lights, and the secret moments when the cameras stopped rolling but their hearts continued to speak. There was one moment she described that melted the hearts of every fan listening. It was a night shoot, the air was cold, and her hands were shaking. Yu Menglong noticed, and without saying a word, wrapped his coat around her shoulders. She looked up at him, and in that silent instant, something changed. "From that night," she whispered in her message, "I stopped pretending. I knew I had fallen for you." Her words lingered like the last line of a poem. She confessed that even when rumors tried to twist their story and the industry pulled them apart, her feelings never faded. "People said it was all acting," she said with a faint smile, "but how do you act when your heart refuses to listen to the director's cut?" The most emotional part came when she talked about their final project together. She described how it felt to shoot their last scene, knowing it might also be their real goodbye. "When the director said cut," she said, her voice breaking, "I wanted to tell you everything. But I saw your eyes, and I knew you already understood. You always did." The message continued for several minutes, each line more emotional than the last. She spoke about how difficult it was to see him move on, how she smiled in interviews pretending to be fine, and how she found herself scrolling through old pictures late at night. "You once told me that timing is everything," she said softly. "But what if our timing was always almost right, yet never enough?" Fans who heard the message described it as the most touching confession they had ever witnessed. Within hours, her words had spread across every corner of social media. Hashtags began to trend, and thousands of fans wrote comments sharing how deeply they were moved. Some said it felt like listening to a real-life drama unfolding before their eyes. Others said it reminded them that love, no matter how beautiful, sometimes ends without closure. But for many, it was not just about sadness. It was about the bravery of a woman who chose to speak her truth. Later that evening, Yu Menglong posted something unexpected. A photo of the same location where they had filmed their most emotional scene, with a short caption that read, "Some memories never fade." The internet went silent. It was the response no one saw coming. People began to speculate if it meant he had heard her message. Some believed it was his quiet way of saying he felt the same. Others thought it was simply his way of honoring what they once shared. But one thing was certain. That simple post reignited emotions that fans thought were long gone. Xing Fei's message became a symbol of honest love, the kind that doesn't need a perfect ending to be real. In her closing words, she said, "Even if we never meet again under the same light, I hope you know that you were my favorite chapter, the one I will never forget." The recording ended, but its echo lingered everywhere. People played it over and over, each time feeling the depth of her sincerity. Her message was not just a farewell. It was a reminder that true feelings never truly vanish, they only transform into quiet memories that stay with us forever. In the days that followed, clips of her message filled fan pages, edits of their old moments flooded the internet, and even those who never believed in their chemistry found themselves rewatching their old dramas, seeing the connection in a new light. It was more than just nostalgia. It was a story of two souls whose paths crossed in a world that demanded perfection. Yet what they shared was far from scripted. It was real, raw, and beautifully imperfect. By the end of the week, one fan wrote a comment that summed it all up perfectly. They may never say it out loud again, but everyone can see it. Their hearts spoke once, and the world will never forget. And that is how Xing Fei's final love message to Yu Menglong became a timeless moment in C-drama history. Not because of what was said, but because of the truth behind every word. A love that refused to fade, even after the cameras stopped rolling. The moment Xing Fei's voice faded into silence, the entire room seemed to stop breathing. Her last words still lingered in the air, echoing softly like a melody that refused to fade. The crew members who had gathered quietly behind the cameras exchanged uncertain glances, as if unsure whether to clap or simply stand still in reverence. It was not just a farewell, it was a confession wrapped in years of unspoken affection and quiet heartbreak. For a long moment, Yu Menglong said nothing. He sat there, motionless, eyes lowered, his fingers trembling slightly as they brushed the edge of the table. The air between them felt heavy, filled with memories that neither could escape. Every shared smile, every behind-the-scenes laugh, every stolen glance from their years of working together seemed to replay like a silent movie in his mind. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of everything he had never said. The words Xing Fei had spoken had opened a door he thought he had locked long ago. She had been his calm in the storm, his inspiration in the long, lonely nights of filming, the one who could make him laugh when the pressure of fame became too heavy. He stood slowly, as if afraid that moving too quickly would shatter the fragile moment hanging between them. Xing Fei watched him with quiet anticipation, her hands clasped together, her heart beating in rhythm with the silence that filled the room. "Fei," he began softly, his voice almost breaking, "you have always known me better than I know myself." His words were simple, but the emotion behind them was overwhelming. He paused, his gaze finding hers with a depth that words could never capture. Every time we worked together, every scene, every rehearsal, it never felt like acting. It felt real. Too real sometimes. A tear escaped down Xing Fei's cheek, though she tried to smile. Her eyes glistened, catching the soft lights that framed the stage. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered. "I just needed you to know." But Yu Menglong shook his head gently. "I do need to say something, because if I don't, I'll regret it for the rest of my life." The room fell even quieter. The sound of the wind outside could almost be heard. "You once told me that some connections never fade, no matter where life takes us," he continued. "And I think you were right. I tried to move on, to tell myself that it was just a part of the story we told on screen. But every time I saw you, I realized it wasn't just fiction. You became a part of my reality." Xing Fei's lips trembled. She had imagined this moment so many times in her mind, his acknowledgement, his truth. But now that it was happening, it felt both beautiful and painful. "I don't know what the future holds," Yu Menglong said softly, taking a hesitant step closer to her. "But I know that you've changed my life in ways I'll never forget. And if someday fate allows, maybe we'll meet again. Not as actors, not as co-stars, but as two people who were once brave enough to love, even when the world wasn't watching." Her breath caught, tears slipping down her face in quiet streams. The room was filled with raw, unfiltered emotion. The camera that had been rolling the entire time captured a moment that would soon become one of the most talked about scenes in the entire industry. Not because it was part of a script, but because it wasn't. When Yu Menglong finished speaking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was worn at the edges, clearly something he had kept for a long time. He placed it gently on the table in front of her. You wrote this for me years ago, he said with a faint smile. I never answered it then, but I've carried it with me ever since. Her eyes widened. She remembered that note. It was something she had written during their first drama together. A simple letter she never intended him to find. It was full of admiration, gratitude, and a kind of emotion she had never been brave enough to say out loud. I guess, he said quietly, this is me finally answering. He turned to walk away, his steps slow but steady, as if every movement carried the weight of closure. Xing Fei clutched the paper tightly in her hands, unable to hold back her tears any longer. The note felt warm against her palms, almost as if it carried the last bit of his touch. As he reached the door, she called his name one last time. He stopped, turning just enough for their eyes to meet again. Thank you, she said through her tears, her voice trembling. For everything. He gave her a small, knowing smile, the kind that said all the things words could never express, and then quietly walked out of the room. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Xing Fei alone with the echo of his footsteps and the weight of everything they had shared. She unfolded the old note and read her own handwriting again, her tears smudging the ink. At the bottom, a new line had been added in his handwriting, simple but powerful. I felt it too. She pressed the paper to her chest, letting the tears fall freely, and for the first time, she smiled through the pain. It was not an ending, but a quiet acknowledgement that some love stories never really end. They simply live on in silence and memory, and in the spaces between two hearts that once beat as one. Outside, the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden glow through the windows. The world was moving on, but somewhere within that light, their story remained, timeless, tender, and true. And though the cameras had stopped rolling, everyone who witnessed that moment knew one thing for sure. This was not just acting. This was real, and it was beautiful.